This is the new 2025 Ford Mustang GTD, and it's a very special Ford Mustang. This is essentially a street-legal version of the Mustang GT3 race car with over 800 horsepower from a supercharged V8 and a starting price of around $325,000 for a Mustang. This is the most powerful, most expensive, most special Mustang ever made. And today I'm going to review it and show you all of its quirks and features. Before we get started, are you ready for your next cool car? Sell your enthusiast car on Cars and Bids. Trading in your car to dealers means you aren't getting market value for your car, leaving you with less cash for your next fun car. Just look at our recent sales of these cool cars compared to current trade-in value. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is a trade-in offer, and this was the Cars and Bids result. This is the trade-in offer, and this is the Cars and Bids result. Get started now on carsandbids.com. Sell on Cars and Bids and join the best community to sell your enthusiast car. All right, time for the quirks and features of the Mustang GTD, and we start with its craziest quirks, and that means talking suspension. This car has inboard suspension, so it's not mounted right at the wheels, it's mounted like further inside the car. There are various advantages to inboard suspension, but it also gives this car an amazing party trick. There is a window in the interior, in the back, that is looking at the suspension, and you can watch it move up, down, in, out, whatever you want to say, while you drive around. So you literally watch the suspension articulate as you're driving. Of course, you really need to be paying attention while you're driving, but if you want to pay attention to the suspension, you can. A window into the suspension, watching it actively move as you drive. That is so amazingly cool. And if that's not crazy enough for you, how about the rear wing, which is mounted not on the trunk lid like every other car, but instead on the C-pillar next to the rear window, with these giant wing mounts sticking out and going all the way back to the rear of the car and holding up this massive rear wing. The wing is obviously huge and insane and a major focal point of the view of this car from basically any angle, but the other crazy thing about it is it has hydraulically actuated flaps that move around and adjust their angles constantly when you're driving in order to provide the maximum amount of downforce in basically any situation. And when you look in the rearview mirror, you can see the flaps like moving up or down depending on whether you're cornering or going straight or how fast you're going. They're always moving if you're in the drive modes where the hydraulics are activated. Crazy to look back there and see that huge wing and the moving flaps. And another quirk, you might think that a rear pillar mounted wing would get in the way of accessing the trunk. And indeed, you're correct. In fact, the trunk in this car is not to be accessed. It is certainly not for storage. In order to get into the trunk, you press the little trunk popper button on the key fob like in any other Mustang, but then you have to undo two locking pins at the top edges of the trunk, as you can see. You undo those, and the trunk is not hinged to lift up. Instead, you remove the trunk body panel completely from the car, and only then do you gain access to the trunk. But as you can see, when you're in here, there is no real need to gain access to the trunk because it is completely filled with mechanical components. In fact, back here you have a cooling system for all of the hydraulics in this car, like the wing and some others I'll discuss soon. There's also various other mechanical components back here, the most important of which is the transmission. This car has a dual clutch automatic transmission, although it's called a transaxle technically when it's mounted in the same place as the drive wheels, but either way, it's back here in the trunk rather than up front next to the engine like in normal Mustang models, and that too is taking up your trunk space, meaning you don't access the trunk. There's no cargo storage space back there, and you're not really supposed to open it with any frequency, so no problem blocking it with a big wing since you don't use it. And if that stuff hasn't already convinced you that this is the craziest Mustang ever, let's talk about what's under the hood. First, let's talk about accessing the hood, the engine bay. You go into the driver footwell, you pull on a latch like you do in a normal car, and when you do that, nothing happens. There is no beep, there is no pop of the hood, there is no confirmation that you've done anything, but you have started the process. Next, you come around to the front of the car and you see two more locking pins, just like on the trunk in back. They're buttons. You push on either side, both sides, and then you unlock the hood, and then you still have a separate latch like in a normal car where you open up the hood from there and you get access to the engine, which is wild. In this car, a 5.2 liter supercharged V8 with 815 horsepower and almost 670 pound-feet of torque. Massive, unbelievable numbers in this era, especially from a big old school V8. In fact, this car has more than 300 horsepower more than the race car upon which it's based. 300 horses more than the race car in a road car. So, since I've mentioned the race car, I probably should explain a little bit more about what this car is and why it exists. So, Mustang GTD, that stands for Grand Touring Daytona, which is a race class in the IMSA racing series where Ford races a Mustang GT3 race car. But while the GT3 race car is limited to 500 horsepower due to various racing classifications that allow it to fit into its specific class, the road car has no specific limitations. And so Ford took the race car and they thought, we want to take this to the street, but we want to make it even crazier than the race car, and so they did. Now, I asked Ford why. Like, you make the Explorer and the F-150 volume vehicles, hundreds of thousands of sales. Why are you making a car like this? And they told me that Jim Farley, the chief executive of Ford, was looking at the Mustang GT3 and he was wondering, hey, can we make a road-going version of it? Because he's into cars, he's a performance car enthusiast, he likes this stuff, and they figured, why not? And the GTD is the result of that kind of cool whim, sort of an extracurricular activity compared to what Ford is most known for. And so, with a little background info in mind, let's go through the rest of the quirks and features that make this car so interesting, starting back under the hood where you can see stainless steel for the coolant tank for this car as opposed to traditional plastic. That's obviously an upgrade intended for track use. This car could get really hot in a racing application, and so that's like a beefed up part to help make sure that it won't overheat. Same deal, by the way, with the hood. You can see, first off, this is a vastly different hood than what you get in a regular Mustang. Of course, the hood pins, but it's also bulged out, and there are two openings in the center, sort of like nostrils. These are screens to, again, allow with heat dissipation for the engine to do its best of cooling down, and Ford tells me that these screens can be removed very simply with just Allen wrenches. You can take them off to maximize cooling at the racetrack. If you're really starting to overheat, you can get a little more cooling by removing them. The other important thing to note about the hood panel in this car is that it's carbon fiber. And in fact, all of the body panels in the Mustang GTD are made out of carbon fiber with the exception of the doors. The entire body of this car is entirely carbon fiber, which is obviously very different from the regular Mustang. And also different from the regular Mustang, since we're talking body panels, let's talk about the wide body stance. Holy crap, this thing is wide. These flared out front and rear fenders serve to give this car an unbelievable stance, makes it much more aggressive looking than the regular Mustang, which is already a pretty aggressive looking sports car. You can see this wide track fueled by these big tires underneath. You have a massive stance and it gives it kind of a race car feel when you're taking a look. And speaking of the fenders, probably the most noticeable design item on the outside of this car, aside from the wide body and the giant wing, the vents over the front wheels on the front fenders. Massive fender vents here, like you have at a Porsche GT3 RS, but way bigger, way more pronounced, way more obvious. Ford says that these vents help channel the air as they kind of go over the front and the fender area of the car and improve this car's overall aerodynamics. And they are certainly a piece that gives it a very distinctive look on the outside, combined with all the other stuff. And indeed, aerodynamics are a big story with this car. Obviously, I mentioned the wing and the vents on the front fenders, but there's more than just that. This particular Mustang GTD is equipped with the optional performance package, which adds a bunch of cool features, including, probably most importantly, all the hydraulics. So I mentioned before, the wing has that hydraulic flap where it goes up and down while you're driving, pretty cool, but there are other hydraulic flaps underneath the car in the front that also help channel airflow. And if you get the performance package, you get those hydraulic flaps as well. You can't see them when you're just sitting here looking at the car, but they're there and they're improving your racetrack lap times. The performance package also includes some other benefits too. Up front, you have these dive planes in the front bumper area that again help with your aerodynamics, and GTD models equipped with the performance package also have a larger, longer front splitter, which again improves aero for this car. But my personal favorite upgrade that comes with the performance package is lightweight carpeting. None of that heavy interior carpeting you get in the regular GTD. No, lightweight carpeting in here, which surely saves lots of weight and makes you considerably faster. So you might be wondering, what, pray tell, does the performance package cost? How much extra is it as an option? The answer is Ford won't reveal that. In fact, Ford is not announcing any options pricing for this car. That information is strictly limited to the knowledge of owners and potential owners of the GTD. It's not being released publicly. The only thing Ford will say is that the base price of this car is around $325,000. Huge money. $325,000 for a Mustang, you're thinking? Well, yes, but as you've already started to discover, this is no ordinary Mustang. And indeed, the GTD has many more upgrades compared to a standard Mustang beyond what I have already mentioned. For example, you get a carbon fiber drive shaft in this car to save weight. You also have a titanium exhaust, again, to save weight, a big benefit over the regular Mustang. And there's a lot more. Check this out. The trunk I mentioned is full of cooling equipment for the hydraulics and other stuff, but what you can't see with the trunk panel off is that there are actual cooling ducts mounted on the top of the trunk lid in order to draw in air for the cooling system for the hydraulics. You do not often find cooling ducts on a trunk lid, but that is the situation with the GTD. In fact, rear cooling is a bit of an important part of the GTD. Obviously, it's a big deal since they got rid of the trunk so they could do it, but it's more than just those trunk-mounted air intakes. You also have vents back here on the back side of the trunk, as you can see, 2 mesh vents, which of course do not appear on the standard Mustang. They also help for rear cooling. And you have air intakes on the side of the car. You can see here air intakes in the back. This is not something you typically see on a front-engined vehicle, but again, here it's necessary to bring air into the trunk area and cool down your hydraulics, your transmission, and all the mechanical stuff in back. And it goes further. The GTD also comes with carbon ceramic brakes, like you might expect on a track-focused car, especially at this price point, and Michelin Pilot Sport Cup 2R tires, which are very sticky and very, well, they're road legal, but just. They're really intended for sticking to surfaces where you're going fast around corners, aka the racetrack. This car also has a tremendously complex and advanced adaptive suspension system. I don't get into those kind of complexities on this channel, but it is really impressive, well done, created by Multimatic, which is the same company that built the new Ford GT. Obviously, I already showed you how some of it works. You can see with that inboard suspension window in the interior, which I still think is one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But beyond that, the other cool suspension trick is that this car can lower. If you go into the racetrack drive mode, the car automatically lowers 1.5 inches, and it does so practically
immediately when you go into that mode, gets all the way down, and then it's ready, lowers center of gravity for driving on the track and optimizing lap times. That's pretty cool. And in addition to all of the fantastic mechanical upgrades this car has over a standard Mustang to help justify its price tag, it also includes some cosmetic changes that I think are worth pointing out. For one, in back, the badge says GTD, which makes sense, that's what this car is, and it's in carbon fiber, which is pretty cool. Also badging on the back, you might not notice right away, but on the underside of the rear spoiler flap, the word Mustang is written out, printed in massive letters going across the entire width of the car. Now, of course, this is only visible in certain rear wing flap configurations, so while you're driving, it might say Mustang, and then nothing, and then Mustang, depending on how hard you're cornering. Now, speaking of badging, up front, of course, you have the famous Mustang running horse emblem. It is also made of carbon fiber, which is a pretty cool touch up there as well. And another cosmetic upgrade on this car, of course, you have distinctive wheels compared to any other Mustang model, and they are offered in optional magnesium for even more lighter weight, which is especially important where the wheels are located in the car, saving weight there. So you have a very distinctive and special wheel design that again gives this car a special look compared to a normal Mustang, as if all the rest of the stuff didn't already do that. And then there's the personalization. Ford told me there are not that many options with this car, but there's a huge range of personalization options that people can do, including various trim differences and style changes and interiors and colors. And in fact, Ford is offering on this car an optional color lockout that you can pick a color and then pay extra to lock out the color so that nobody else can have it on their GTD. So not only are you paying for a special color, you're paying for the exclusivity of being the only person who got a car in that color, which is a pretty cool idea that contributes to the personalization and the specialness of GTD. And since we're talking options, let's move on to the interior of the GTD, where Ford is offering one of the craziest options of all in this car, and that would be 3D printed paddle shifters and a 3D printed gear selector that come from a retired F-22 fighter jet. That is an optional extra. This car, this one, does not have that option. So I don't exactly know how it looks, but if you want, you can choose fighter jet derived paddle shifters and a gear selector dial, which is a pretty crazy thing, and again speaks to just how special and interesting this car is. But anyway, once you get inside, you start to discover quickly that there are quite a few GTD specific quirks and features in here. Of course, the most noticeable, I've already showed you, that rear window for the suspension in the back, but there's a lot of other stuff beyond that. For one, in the back, you no longer have rear seats. Obviously, regular Mustang models have back seats. This car does not. They're removed both to save weight and to let you see the window for the suspension because you know you wanna. But even before you notice that the rear seats have been deleted, just when you're climbing inside the car, you see on the door sill it says Ford Performance, welcoming you into obviously a more special Mustang than you might be used to. And the little puddle lamp that projects the light from the bottom of the doors when you open the doors, that is a GTD. You can see the silhouette there is not a regular Mustang. It has the distinctive GTD rear spoiler, and so even the little puddle lamps that turn on when it's dark show that you have a GTD, as if people couldn't already tell. Now, beyond some of that stuff, I will say when you get in this interior, other GTD specific upgrades are surprisingly subtle in here. In fact, a lot of this interior is straight out of a Mustang Dark Horse. Ford told me there's a lot of sort of basic Dark Horse stuff in the interior, and that's fine. The Dark Horse has a nice interior, already pretty focused performance car, and indeed a lot of the stuff you'll see here is pretty familiar Ford Mustang. In fact, even the key is just a regular Ford Mustang key, which I find funny because that's something that I have always been mocked for about my Ford GT, that it just has the key from a regular Ford model of its era. Well, that's also true of the very special Mustang GTD, despite how, well, very special it is. Now, in spite of similarities with other Mustang models, you do have some nice upgrades here. The seats are these very heavily bolstered sport seats, as you can see, with holes in the backrest, so you can put a racing harness through for track use, and of course it says GTD imprinted onto the leather on the headrest. You also have a lot of carbon fiber in this car. You can see the center console around the gear selector, carbon fiber. Same deal on the dashboard over on the passenger side, carbon fiber. You also have carbon on the wheel, on the door panels, and in various other places in this interior, more than a standard Mustang. And by the way, speaking of that dashboard, on the passenger side, you can see there is a plaque here that says GTD with some numbers. The numbers are the last 4 digits of the VIN, which is kind of unusual. Instead of like a production number or the number in sequence, the last 4 in the VIN. So this, which must be a very early production car, since it's a press car before they're on sale, gets 5963. I guess technically then these cars are numbered, but not in any way that'll be discernible to most people. Now, beyond that stuff, there are a couple of other interesting quirks and features in here. For one, this button in the center control stack, you can see the front of the car with an arrow. That is the front axle lifter in this car, and it is standard on all Mustang GTD models. You press that and the front lifts up so you can clear kind of lower curbs, which is especially important for the performance package models with their longer front splitter. The GTD also comes with its own distinctive gauge cluster display orientation. You have some of the regular Mustang displays in here, but then there is a GTD specific display that you can use to cycle through a lot more information, vehicle information, temperatures, etc., than what you would get in a standard Mustang, which is pretty cool to see. Now, speaking of that gauge cluster, it's worth mentioning something cool about this car and all Mustang models is that it changes its shape and its orientation depending on what drive mode you're in. So you cycle through the drive modes and you can see you have a different gauge cluster orientation in each one, including a very special one in the race track mode. You can see it heavily emphasizes your revs, gives you more vehicle info that might be pertinent on the track, and that's a pretty cool thing that Ford has. Now, on the steering wheel, you can see these red buttons over on the left side. That is where you adjust your drive mode, up, down, to change through the different modes, and it's also where you adjust various other performance characteristics of this car. You can see a suspension button here that will firm up the suspension or make it more comfortable. Over on the other side, this steering wheel button will adjust the sharpness of the steering, and you also have an exhaust button here. You press this and it turns on the exhaust, that titanium exhaust, all extra loud. Take a listen to a couple of revs in this car. And as far as other interesting quirks and features, in the center control stack, you can see a group of different buttons in here, pretty standard on the Mustang, including your bright red engine start stop button. But you also have here a racetrack button. You can see there's a track and like a checkered flag. You press that and it pulls up the track apps for this car. And there are various apps that you can access in here for track use. Like if you want to measure your drag racing times, your braking performance, or a lap timer, it's all located in here. And there's a few other important things in here too, like for instance, launch control. You can turn it on and off in this screen, and line lock, which is a drag racing feature, can also be turned on and off in here. And you can also use this screen to turn off the active aerodynamics if for whatever reason you don't want them on. You can lock them out in this screen and turn them off completely. Otherwise, if you have them enabled, they will automatically start doing their thing every time you go into sport mode or one of the sportier drive modes. Now, beyond the track stuff in this infotainment system, this is largely a typical infotainment system from a typical Mustang, which means you have all the usual stuff and it's pretty good. Responsive to your touch, it's obviously high quality, high resolution, full color. It works well, does what you'd want. It is a great infotainment system like in other Ford models. Unfortunately, that also means that it includes the climate controls. So you don't have a distinctive button or switch set up for the climate controls separate from the infotainment. It's all integrated into the screen, so to change stuff, you got to go into the screen to do it. Fortunately, the climate controls are placed along the bottom of the screen, so you can make simple adjustments without having to go into a menu. And frankly, with a vehicle like this, we should be happy it has climate controls at all. But indeed it does, and some nice luxuries in here. Dual zone climate control, air conditioning. You even have lane centering, where the car will steer you back into your lane if you drift out. And there's even Amazon Alexa integrated integrated into the infotainment system in your $325,000 track-ready Mustang GTD. So you have the money, you think it's cool, you might be wondering, can you get one? Is this car even still available, or is it all sold out? Well, Ford told me their plan is to build around 300 to 700 units of the Mustang GTD each year with no stated final production number for this car. Ford also told me that the GTD is sold out for the 25 and 26 model years, but I have a suspicion that it's going to continue on longer than that, meaning if you want one of these and you're willing to wait a little bit, you can probably get one, configure your own, and have your own GTD. But it's worth pointing out that if the new Ford GT is any indication, the one that came out 10 years ago, if that gives us any idea, Ford probably has more tricks up its sleeve with the GTD. There are probably more special versions coming, special editions, cool paint and cosmetics, and maybe even some extra sporty models. So if you like the GTD and you're disappointed you have to wait, don't be surprised if it ends up working out. Maybe you'll get something cool in a couple years as this car goes on. For now, this is the GTD we got, and I want to get behind the wheel. I've wanted to drive this car for months now, and it's finally time. Let's see how the GTD drives. All right, driving the GTD. I've wanted to do this for a long, long time. This is a very special car. Let's see what it's like on the road. First impression, getting into this car and driving it, your first thing when you climb inside, it's a lot like a Mustang. And honestly, from a driving perspective, initially, or if you just drive around town, it is also surprisingly Mustang-like, which is to say, well, I was expecting this car to be so punishing that it would actually be kind of annoying or difficult to drive. That's actually not true. It's a lot like a 911 GT3, which is a similar sort of thing. It's like the road version of sort of a race car. A little bit less so in that case. That's definitely more road car. But nonetheless, I felt that this was going to be, I'm worried it's going to be crazy punishing. It's not really. And I'm actually in sport mode right now. And yeah, it's a harsh ride, again, like a 911 GT3, but it's not just over the top, insane, terrible, awful. It's like totally acceptable if you know what you're getting into. And if you have one of these cars and you're driving one of these cars, you know what you're getting into. All right, let me step on it here. The power is unreal, and that is clear at every stage of the power delivery. 815 supercharged horsepower, you put your foot on it a little bit, and it is a very quick shifting transmission, finds the gear you should be in basically right away, and it's just like, all right, let's go. You get a lot of noise and you get a lot of speed very, very quickly in a very impressive way. This car is plain fast. Now, of course, the other cool thing about this car is the way that it handles, the way that it drives, and it really is a sharp, sharp steering car. The regular Mustang already is, to be clear, like it's pretty impressive just how quickly that car steers. I've always been surprised by that in the new Mustang. But this particular one is on a completely different level of unbelievability with its just incredible sharpness in the way that it steers. It just completely, the moment you turn the steering wheel, you start going in the direction you want to go, very predictable, but very precise, very quick. Not what I would expect from a big old V8 powered front engine car, but it is quite amazing and adept at it. But where this car really shines is less steering, which is good, and more just overall handling. It is amazing to me just how planted this car feels, how completely dialed in it feels from a handling perspective. It feels like it would be hard to get the tail out. I imagine it isn't. It's got a lot of power, but it's also got big, thick tires back there and some very impressive suspension. The car stays completely flat under hard cornering in a really impressive way. Even when the steering is maybe feeling a little bit over-assisted, the dynamics of the car are just absolutely unmatched. It is really incredible just how planted it feels, just how stable it feels, just how precise it feels. Very much like a track weapon, like they're pitching it as, like you would want it to be. Oh, it's so fast. man, it's so fast, although I'm a little wary of flooring it because it makes so much noise that it really attracts some attention. The speed really lets people know, hey, I'm speeding. It's so much different from all these electric cars I drive now, which are also incredibly fast, but which do not have that issue quite as much. Again, pretty impressive to drive around. One thing I am a little bit surprised about is that the transmission, although it is quick and it is fast to get into gear and shift from where you want, when you're doing low speeds, it definitely feels more mechanical and more jerky. Now that's generally true of ultra high performance cars that I've driven, race cars and vehicles like that. But it is I wouldn't call it disappointing, but you definitely do have a little bit more kind of hesitation and jerkiness at low speeds, just sort of because of the nature of the beast. I mean, this car is not really intended to be like a low speed around town cruiser type vehicle, and that's one of the drawbacks that you get from that. One thing I was curious about for the last few months, as I've been reading the specs about this car and hearing about it, I've been curious, is it going to be distinct enough from the Mustang to justify its price tag and to justify the level of hype and desire and interest that has been around it? And I gotta say, I really think it is. The powertrain is amazing. It feels amazing. It has unbelievable power at any RPM. It just is an incredible, raucous, crazy engine. I drove here to this event here in Palm Springs 2.5 hours in my 05 Ford GT, and this thing feels like a different level of fast. I mean, it is just such an unbelievable performance craziness from a power perspective. So I think the engine does a great job. The suspension is really magical. The new Ford Mustang is a really impressive car in terms of cornering capabilities, but this is just on a totally different level of what it can do and how it feels on the road. I mean, this feels like it's up there with some of the very great handling sports cars of our time. And then there's all the other incredible trick stuff, like your dual clutch transmission, like just the general craziness of the car. I love how it looks. I love the big fenders. I love the big wing. There's a lot of really cool stuff about this car that does distinguish it. And then of course you factor in, low production volume, which is going to appeal to enthusiasts and collectors. And it's just hard not to understand the great benefits of this car and why it is so expensive. This is not a practical daily driver car. However, I truly believe it is not as impractical as I was expecting. I thought this would feel a lot more like annoying race car than it does. Not like the Aston Martin Valkyrie, but getting more towards that range where it's like you're getting in it because you want to take it to an event or whatever, but you don't really, you're like, all right, I'll drive the GTD. I don't really feel that way. I think you totally could drive this around, and I expect to see people driving it around. I think it's a surprisingly drivable car. Nonetheless, it has its compromises in terms of all the stuff that I've mentioned. Nonetheless, this is a tremendously complete package and an amazingly impressive car. I really am surprised by just how exceptional this car is to drive. It feels like when I'm in my Carrera GT, like you feel like you're driving a precision instrument on the road, and like everybody else is playing it slow motion. Like some of the very best athletes probably feel if they have to play like a normie. That's kind of what this car feels like to drive. It really is an amazing proposition, and it's fun to get behind the wheel and check it out. And so that's the new 2025 Ford Mustang GTD. This is an unbelievably exciting, crazy, insane car. So much that it's hard to believe it comes from the same people who give us normal cars like the F-150 and the Edge. This is definitely the most exciting new Ford in years, and it's one of the most exciting new cars, period. And now it's time to give the new Mustang GTD a DougScore. And the DougScore is here, 68 out of 100, which puts the Mustang GTD here close to the famed Porsche GT3 RS and in serious contention with some amazing cars. The GTD has a lot of great benefits, and it really is on the level with some of today's most incredible performance cars. It's expensive, but Ford has a history of making expensive halo cars that gain value, and I suspect this one will continue the trend.